So thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm a professional advisor here at the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, and I'm also a children's occupational therapist. And I've been involved in a brilliant project over the past couple of months, which is looking at how to set up and manage successful school-based OT learner placements. School-based learner placements being a type of role emerging placement with long-arm supervision. And I've been working on this project with my fab colleague, Kate Jackson, and I'm delighted that we've got three occupational therapists joining us today to talk about their experience of developing and delivering these school-based placements. So a little bit of background to the project. We were commissioned by NHS England right at the end of last year to deliver this project with a small amount of money with a very tight timescale. And the reason that we were asked to think about how that we could increase placement capacity by expanding the number of school-based placements, the reason that we're asked to do that is because, as we all know, we are training more occupational therapists, which is absolutely fantastic. Many more different routes to registration, but that does mean that we need more placements. We also know that there's a high demand for paediatric placements, as people call them, from our OT learners that we're not currently meeting. And alongside that, we also know that there are some barriers for offering community-based placements for occupational therapy learners in rural and coastal areas. And of course, school-based placements would fall into that category of community-based placements. So offering more school-based placements is one part of the solution, or could be part of the solution to increasing placement capacity. We've also got a policy context. Here at RCOT, our ambition is for every school to have access to occupational therapy expertise, and school-based placements, learner placements, is one way that we could help to achieve that. And also school-based practice aligns with that policy shift that we're seeing at the moment, which is towards early intervention and prevention, positioning occupational therapy where children and young people are. It's also interesting that the Department for Education are interested in how we can have, and the benefits of having AHP learners on placements in schools. Alongside that, all of that, of course, we've got the professional imperative. We know that we've got recruitment challenges in children's occupational therapy services. And if we can increase the number of placements that we're offering in children's services, then we're creating that pipeline, that future workforce of people who've got the confidence, hopefully, and skills to apply for the vacancies that we have. And of course, school-based placements support the occupation-centred practice that we are all striving to achieve. So we've been developing some guidance over the past few months. I've been talking to lots of occupational therapists who've been delivering school-based placements either very recently or for a longer period of time, and looking at the literature. We'll be publishing this guidance online in the not too distant future, but so this is a bit of a taster really about what's to come. The primary audience for the guidance is occupational therapists, primarily children's occupational therapy teams who want to either establish or expand their school-based placement offer. It's for practice educators and HEIs. And we've also got some, I spoke to some fabulous occupational therapy learners who have had a school-based placement, so we've been able to capture some of their advice and recommendations too. But we also think there'll be interest in the guidance from local authorities and schools who might be interested in hosting school-based placements. And we've also already had interest from the international school-based OT community. So although our guidance is aimed at schools in the UK, we think that quite a lot of the advice is transferable. So the purpose of the guidance is to help OT teams to set up and deliver successful school-based placements, or to expand the offer if they're offering them already. We're covering various different areas within the guidance. The development of school-based placements, and I'm delighted that Sophie's here today to talk about her experience of doing that with her team. We're talking about preparation for school-based placements, and Caroline is going to expand on that a little bit. And then we've got a section on delivery. So whilst you're having these school-based placements, what can we do to make sure it's successful from everybody's perspective? And Ellie's going to bring her unique perspective on that. As I said, we've got that section on advice for learners. We've also got a section on the impact, the benefits of school-based placements for all partners that are involved in the process. And then we've got some brilliant case studies. So thank you to everybody who has taken part and shared their experience with us. So just to give you a little bit of a taster about what's coming, we've spoken to everybody, looked at the literature. Kate and I have explored all of this together, and we've come up with 10 facilitators for successful school-based placements, and we'll make sure that we share these headlines with you after this session today. It's not rocket science. These will be very familiar to you, and they align very much with the placement principles. And there are just two that I want to pull out. One is the focus of these placements. The work that our learners are doing is very much on the universal or targeted interventions and support. Their role is not to provide that individualised occupational therapy input, including provision for children and young people who have a statutory assessment or an EHC of their learning needs. And the second really important point to say is that it's important when working with children and young people that we start planning for the end of the placement right at the beginning. As we know, children develop attachments to people, and it's really important that we anticipate and plan for that. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over now to Sophie. Sophie, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you very much, Sally, for inviting me to be here today. I'm Sophie Graves. I'm a senior lecture practitioner in placement expansion at Anglia Ruskin University, which is quite a unique role, and it does mean that I get to focus more so on our allied health courses with a focus for OT, because I am one. And so I have been asked to come and share my presentation on occupational therapy schools-based placements, and I'm hoping that that should now be up on your screens. Yeah. Fab, thank you. Yeah, so I've been asked to share my experience of setting up an occupational therapy school-based placement from a HEI, higher education institution perspective. So we had the idea of supporting learners in schools, mainly, and as Sally indicated, from a placement expansion and innovation perspective. There are always challenges with regards to placement capacity. But at Anglia Ruskin University, this project isn't new when it comes to working in schools, because our social work team have already developed some really strong relationships, and there have been sort of research and PhDs all done around this Swiss project, so social work in schools. So we hoped that from their good grounding, we could build on that a little bit more for our occupational therapy learners. So I personally made contact with one of our local schools and reached out to see if it was something that they would be interested in supporting. And they had already had some engagement from occupational therapy in the past, and therefore they were very, very keen on having an OT learner, which is great. So off the back of that, when it comes to offering long arm supervision, there are many different formats of what that comes in, but we were quite keen on that coming ideally from someone who had good understanding of the local area and the local occupational therapy provision for children. So we linked in with our local trust, AHP Education Lead, to establish whether there would be interest in supporting the project. So we started to sort of develop conversations around stakeholder engagement and bringing that all together. And fantastically, the primary...
Sorry, Sophie, you was on mute then.
Yeah, strange. When did that just randomly turned itself on. So we had our key stakeholders being the primary school, who were happy to offer the placement, and then the SENCO for the school would be offering on-site supervision, so ensuring that that learner sort of got a good induction. They were able to identify particular children or classrooms or projects and things that they were hoping the learner might be able to engage in. They had a really good understanding of the school layout and what they needed. So then we also had an identified long arm supervisor from Cambridge and Peterborough NHS Foundation Trust. I have their permission to share that, and they were keen to be a part of this, and I know have linked in with Sally as well around this project. So we delivered a pilot, just the one OT student, very, very tiny pilot in a primary school, with the long arm supervision being provided by our local trust. And we got lots of really positive feedback, which then led us to the growth of the project. And there was a piece of research conducted by Alison and Thompson with one of our nearby other trusts, so Cambridge Community Services, who looked at speech and language therapists increasing placement capacity and using a peer-assisted learning approach, which had been seen by the children's OT team lead in Peterborough. And she was really keen to look at how we could use the approach that they had adopted, how we could increase it. Again, that real focus and drive to have OTs in schools, and there being that OT provision in whatever format that may look like. So we developed jointly an expression of interest that went out to all of the schools in the local area via the area SENCO. So the children's OT team lead had contact with the local authority area SENCO, who then spread it out with an idea that we really wanted schools who were keen to have OTs. We provided obviously a blurb about what occupational therapy support should look like, and I'm coming back and I'll talk about it again at the end, that more broad perspective with regards to targeted and universal strategies, rather than that they're going to be providing individual targeted intervention, with individual children. So we had 14 schools come forward. Sadly, we didn't actually have enough OT learners to be able to cover that, because we're quite a small course. So we identified 6 OT learners who were fairly local, and they would be across 3 schools, so 2 of them in each. And that was being sort of navigated by the area SENCO. And then we had those 3 primary schools all sign up and agree to host the placement and provide the on-site supervision. So moving forwards, it was about us looking at how we could take a real co-production stance, and how all of the parties, so the practice education lead at CPFT, the children's team at CPFT, this primary school, the SENCO, and us as a university could all work together to make this a really positive experience for everybody. And I wanted here just to draw on the AHP principles of practice-based learning. I feel this really fits. Principle 1 is around learning opportunities being co-produced, but also that they're a whole team approach. Everybody was involved from the very beginning, and we had 2, 3, maybe 4 meetings just chatting it through and making sure that everybody felt confident. And that was before we then involved the learners. So from a project development perspective, as you can see here, it was actually CPFT and the children's team that came forward and asking if we could expand the initial pilot, but definitely something I wanted to explore. We brought in that community local authority level right at the beginning, so that there was that buy-in. And then it was just really important that all of the stakeholders present were all on board with the plan, and that actually any of the queries that might have been there were all ironed out quite quickly, and we had really clear aims and goals for the project. The academic team at Anglia Ruskin then developed some training for on-site supervisors. We have a role emerging handbook. There was practice educator training offered to the on-site supervisors as well as the long arm supervisors, and just really important in being able to share that best practice, auditing those areas and making sure that they were going to be providing a good learning experience for our learners. That project's actually, it commenced on Monday, which is fantastic. And so we will be obtaining a little more of the kind of feedback and looking at the outcome measures for that afterwards, and hopefully that will be shared. And again, just drawing on those principles of practice-based learning and taking a flexible and appropriate supportive model of supervision and delivery. This is a really great way in being able to expand offering. Our local trust felt that it meant that they could definitely expand their offering, but without it needing to put masses of extra demand onto their team. So this is and actually Sally's probably already covered these, but the real benefits of school-based placements, I just wanted to draw upon that, yes, those targeted universal strategies, use of peer-assisted learning is really positive. Being able to enhance those links between schools and local OT services, so there's a better understanding across the board of what OT provision looks like. Then there can be further guidance around specialist referrals and assessments. I think being able to receive supervision from experienced children's OTs is actually really important, and probably easier than maybe some of the academic team who potentially don't have a background in children's OT, and being able to then gain a greater access to the whole team, because it was a whole team approach to supporting this project from our children's OTs. So just to finish and just to leave you with my sort of top tips for setting up these placements, and please do feel free to ask questions later if there's anything I haven't clarified. But I would definitely say networking with your local areas, children's teams, SENCOs, really engage the parties involved, provide guidance and offer an understanding of the benefits of having those OT learners. Training's been key in offering that to both the on-site supervisors and our long-arm supervisors, so they feel comfortable with sort of our paperwork, assessment processes and what's expected. Those expectations are really beneficial, and for the learners too, so we have shared that. And then having that focus on the universal strategy so that there are clear goals for the learners moving forwards. And thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sophie. And it was really fortunate that when we started this project that Sophie and her colleagues were going through this process of establishing a school-based placement offer. So I was able to sort of capture that experience as it happened, which is brilliant. And yeah, good luck with the rest of the placement. And I know that you'll be amazing. You put a lot of work and time into setting it up in the right way, which is amazing. Now going to introduce Caroline. Caroline and her team at Brunel have been offering school-based placements for a little while now. So the thing that I've asked Caroline to share, she's got bags of experience, but the particular bit is about that orientation induction process. So once we've got our placements set up and we've got our learners ready to go, how do we set them up for success? Over to you, Caroline.
Sorry, I'm just coming off mute. Can you hear me?
Yep, all is good.
All is good. Okay, and can you see my screen? My slides? Hello.
Just disappeared again.
Just disappeared. Stop sharing. Oh dear.
Don't you love technology? It's wonderful, isn't it?
Good here. Stop sharing. Yeah. Okay, right. Here we go. There we go. Present.
We're there. Well done.
You're there. Okay, here we go. So thank you for that, everyone. Thank you for waiting. I'm Caroline McHugh. I'm a school-based occupational therapist at Witherslack Group, and I also work at Brunel University. And in both roles, I support students on practice placement in school settings. And today, in this section, we're just going to be looking at how we, the practice placement educators, can plan and deliver an effective orientation programme for students in school settings. So before I get started, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit and give you a story of two students. So Amira and Joe. Amira's first week of placement was an induction and an orientation into school occupational therapy. She was given key information that would support her in her role as an OT student at school. She was encouraged to contact her school SENCO. Amira received a warm reply with details of where to go on her first day, who to ask for, and the SENCO also thanked Amira for sharing her learning profile, as this had enabled the SENCO to arrange a prayer space for Amira to use during her practice placement in the school setting. And by her first day in school, Amira did feel nervous, but she felt confident. And in supervision, she said, it felt like they were ready for me. And because of that, I was ready to be in school. Joe's first day of placement,
Caroline, can I just interrupt a moment?
Yeah.
We can't see all of your slides.
Oh,
Just got a sign saying click to exit full screen. I wonder if you can
okay. Let me
press the buttons.
try again, because I want you to see my slides.
Yeah.
How's that?
Okay, yeah, we're there. That's good.
Good. Okay, so Joe, on the other hand, he went straight to school. He had met his practice placement educator and he knew where to go and who to ask for. But when he got into school, the receptionist was surprised to see him. He waited for nearly an hour to be collected by the SENCO, and he spent his first week in school just really unsure of his role or what OT looked like in a school setting. And during supervision with his educator, he shared that he felt anxious and unsure, and he said he feels like a guest at the wrong party. So this is a tale of two equally capable and enthusiastic OT students whose different first week experiences show how a thoughtful orientation can make the difference for a student feeling really confident and knowing where they're going, or feeling lost and unsure. So this is really about us as the educators. So we know that the students are going to be eager at the start of the placement, but their anxiety and stress will be heightened. So it's up to us to plan an orientation that's going to be vital in setting them up to succeed in schools. So an effective orientation program is really needed because school-based placements are very different to role established or traditional placements. The orientation helps students to understand schools and the school and educational context, and it ensures students perform their roles effectively from the outset as soon as they go into school, and ultimately it will influence the placement success. And orientation is more than a handshake or name badges. It's strategic, and it's an opportunity to ensure that students settle in and feel welcome. It can build their confidence and reduce that anxiety, and it helps to clarify roles and expectations. And really importantly, it just introduces students to that school context and the culture of working and being in schools. So a great school-based practice placement starts with a great beginning, and we need to think at where do we want these students to be by the end of their placement, and what are their learning outcomes, and we need to clarify those and then map them to that school input and the clinical goals, and agree objectives with the school, and set and manage the school's expectations and the students' expectations, and involve students in this process from the beginning. So before placement even begins, there are some key steps we can take to set students up for success, map those learning outcomes and clarify those expectations, but remind the school team that students are not there as specialist OTs. They are there as learners who will be able to support in school, but they will have an OT focus. Do the usual things, send your student a welcome email, arrange a pre-placement visit, invite them to complete a pre-placement profile and ask them if they wish to share any learning needs in advance, so you can prepare and make reasonable adjustments ahead of time, and that these can be implemented in the school setting. And then once they start placement, you would give your usual placement induction, looking at all your essential induction policies. Another thing that's really important in a school placement is to explain how supervision will work, what that will look like, and include how the students will get feedback and how that feedback feeds into their final assessment and grading. So during the orientation process, it's really helpful to help students understand that the school is our client. We're not necessarily working with individual children or young people, and we're really working at that universal whole school, whole class, whole community group level of provision. I really share with every student my excitement about this opportunity that they have to be working with children and young people in the context of their natural school environment, whilst they're doing natural occupations that they need or want or have to do. And then during the orientation, obviously, you can talk through models of practice and frameworks that would be really appropriate to school. And this orientation can really help students to understand school-based OT and what that looks like, and how OTs contribute to inclusive education and support participation. By the end of the orientation, students should have a really good understanding of the structure of the placement, their timetable, and those communication lines need to be confirmed, so students know how to contact you, their practice placement educator. And before students go into the school, we usually send an introductory letter to the school that the school can share with the school community. This helps to explain OT, the role of OT, and what the students will be doing. And we also ask the students to prepare a slide that the teachers can share with the children in their classes. So this is just about really preparing the students to work in the school. So in the orientation, give them time to explore that school context. Let them have a chance to look at the type of school they're going into. Is it specialist? Is it mainstream? Give them opportunities to look at the school website, look at the Ofsted report for that school, maybe look at the school development plan and look at how the school operates on a day-to-day basis. Is there a morning club? Is there an after school club? Are there any extracurricular activities that the student would like to take part in? Then schools are very complex places with complex structures and organising with senior leadership teams, governors, head teachers, middle management, subject leads, teachers, TAs, parents, and it's just really helpful for students to understand how schools operate and work, and how we as OTs and OT students in that setting can collaborate and work in an interdisciplinary way with our partners. And then you can orientate them to the kind of key SEND frameworks and education frameworks, like the SEND Code of Practice, the National Curriculum, Education and Healthcare Plans, and what all this means for children in schools, and what does a typical child be expected to achieve at the end of Key Stage 2, for example. And then there's lots of policies around safer recruitment and just that apply to schools. So just prepare them of what that would look like, and that they will also have to have that induction in the school setting once they're there, and give them some responsibility to ask about safeguarding, where to go in a fire alarm or a lockdown. You need to explicitly teach the students the rules of school. So you need to tell them that they will have responsibility for reporting any incidents or concerns from day one, and that they must be following the school's code of conduct and dress code. I made a mistake several times of forgetting to tell students that they mustn't take nuts into school, and a couple of my students had peanut butter sandwiches, and I felt terrible because it was actually my fault that they were been highlighted that they shouldn't have nuts, and also just reminding them that mobile phones should be nowhere where there are any children. They need to stay in the staff room. And then on that first day of school, just make sure students take their original DBS and their photographic ID, because this is all part of the safer recruitment, and that the student knows who to meet and when, and who their school mentor is. They, on the very first day, they will be meeting the designated safeguarding leads, or being made aware of the safeguarding procedures and how to report any concerns or incidents. And then they'll be having that school induction as well. In that first week, it's all about meeting the school team, meeting the children, and really trying to become part of the school community by joining, morning briefings, after school briefings, going out to break and joining in the dining hall, whatever they can. And this school orientation helps students to understand the school's culture, values and missions quite quickly. Obviously, clinical notes might look a bit different, but students still need to make notes, but obviously maintaining confidentiality and GDPR. And it's important for students in schools, it's important for all of us, but especially students in schools, to use clear, jargon-free language so that the children and young people, our education colleagues and parents really understand the contribution and impact that that's making in the school. And I've just put schools out because do not be put off of having students in school placements, because there will be a school holiday during that placement, I'm sure. But again, in your orientation or at the beginning, you can set students up with a really good project that they can be working on during the school holidays. So just to conclude, that well-planned orientation brings clarity and reduces anxiety. It creates that sense of belonging for students, and shows them that their learning matters, and it lays the foundation for their contribution in a school setting and gives them that confidence, and leads to higher productivity and better outcomes. And just as we are planning for the students ending, beginning at the beginning of the placement, we also want to plan at the beginning the ending of the placement, and prepare students for saying goodbye to the school, because they will become really part of that school community. And every student I've ever worked with in schools, the children become really attached to the OT students and love having them around. So it's really important from day one that the OT students are preparing the children for their ending and the goodbye. And then the students will also need time for debrief and reflections. And most importantly, it's really important that the OT students do a handover so that their work and their contribution can continue in the school after the practice placement has ended. And that's my last slide. So I'll stop sharing now and hand you back over to Sally.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Caroline and the team have got so much experience of running and supporting these practice placements, and it's been brilliant to tap into that. So thank you, particularly for sharing the orientation induction, to making sure that we've got that really great start, and thinking about the educational context, which is a bit like a multidisciplinary team, but in a different environment. So I'm now really pleased to welcome Ellie to the team. Now, Ellie is really has a unique perspective as an occupational therapist, who's somebody as a practice educator, and somebody who's got that insight into education. So, Ellie, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. I have slight tech issues, so Anne is going to share my slides for me. Are you able to do that, Anne? Thank you. Okay, so as a children's occupational therapist based in mainstream schools, this project is so exciting. I managed to take occupational therapy into the mainstream setting by actually applying to be an assistant SENCO. So I came into occupational therapy quite late in life. I was a teaching assistant. So whilst I was in my NHS OT team, learning the craft, I really missed being part of the life of the school. And I thought I'm really keen to take this occupational therapy knowledge into schools. And I was really pleased to do that with a forward-thinking head. So whilst I was working within this trust for almost 10 years, I had the opportunity to take around about 4 or 5 final year OT students. And what I would like to do just through this part of the presentation is to give you a bit of a taste of what that is for the students themselves. Thank you, Anne, if you can move on for me, please. So school-based placements for OT students, it's a great benefit for children because of the OT students can support with that identification of need. They can also help to also support the understanding of occupational therapy in schools, because that is one of the main things that we do tend to come across. Schools don't understand how an OT can support. So it's great for the student, it's great for the school, and also it's great for the profession because it actually introduces students to paediatric OT and to children's occupational therapy. However, as we have heard, really good, thorough preparation is required both for the student and for the school in order for that placement to have the best outcomes for the school and for the children. Thank you, Anne, if you move on for me. So as we've heard, there's the 3-tiered approach that is used through schools, and the students themselves will be undertaking learning activities and providing that intervention through the universal and targeted layers. Thank you, Anne. If you move on, please. So some of the items that they will be looking into and learning about that really can support the children to access their learning and to participate in daily school routines and activities. So first of all, the student would be looking at sensory processing differences, having that understanding and how this may present in schools whilst they're undertaking their observations. If they see a child with their hands over their ears, to use that sensory framework and to try and actually work out why is that happening and what we can do to support. They'll be learning about lots of different equipment such as aid offenders or fidget items that children can use to support them with their sensory differences in school. The student will perhaps undertake an intervention such as sensory circuits. An awful lot of schools can run that now, and a really good, effective sensory circuit can support a number of children throughout their school day. Again, all of this information is also then being learnt by the student, but they're supporting the school staff to understand actually why is it we do what we do. Again, looking at movement or sensory breaks, they are quite often implemented in school. Sometimes they can be a little bit detrimental. They're not getting the best out of that actual movement break. So it's building up that knowledge for the student, but also sharing that knowledge with school staff. Thank you, Anne, if you can move on for me. Another key aspect of OT in school is fine and gross motor skills, and we are thinking about really supporting and doing that early intervention. Year on year, staff in early years foundation stage or reception classes will tell you that children are coming into school with a reduction of those key skills. That could be down to children having more of a sedentary lifestyle. They're not out playing, crawling, climbing so much. So this is something that school staff have had to build up on. So for that OT student, it's the early intervention, and they will be learning about different components of fine motor skills. What can we do to build that up? So they might do research around finger gym boxes that can be implemented in reception and key stage 1 classes. Thank you, Anne, if you move on for me. So as the student learns and begins to undertake the activities, this all enhances the knowledge of not just the student, but as also the school staff. Handwriting is one of the main things that I'm always asked to look about in school, but there's lots of components to handwriting. So again, it's a huge learning activity. for the student. And it's really key that they do have the supervision from someone who has an understanding of children's OT and how that can be supported in schools. Thank you. If you can move on for me, Anne. So looking at the universal approach, again, that is school-wide and can support all pupils. So examples of this could be supporting good posture for handwriting. Some of the posture that I see that children sit at tables and try to undertake handwriting is, you just wonder how they actually manage to get anything written down on the paper. So that is a really, really good piece of work to be undertaken school-wide. Even the teachers, whenever I talk about posture or walk into a classroom, I can see the teachers all sitting up nice. So the word is getting out. The students can undertake a sensory audit once they've have that understanding of sensory processing differences. They can go into the dinner hall, they can undertake observations in the classroom, and then from that they can make suggestions such as creating what some schools call regulation stations within each class to support the regulation of the children. Thank you, Anne, if you move on for me. So this is just examples of some of the targeted interventions. So some of the children might actually need that small group activity to actually build up those skills. So there might be particular handwriting programs or hand and finger strength activities to promote those fine motor skills. The feedback that I get from the students is they absolutely really love, after this huge learning curve, to actually be able to take everything that they know and actually go and work with the children, and even to create some really lovely resources themselves and to take that into school. And the children absolutely love it. And as you've heard, the student just becomes that integral part of the school team. Thank you. If you move on for me, Anne. So it's all about that holistic approach. So working and collaborating with the school staff to get that real understanding of the children that they're working with. So is there anything that we need to know about? You know, are they on the SEN register? Is there any environmental factors that might be impacting on how that child is actually functioning within school? And if anything, if occupational therapy can support within that role. Thank you, Anne. Okay, and then after all this learning, there's also the OT process, and how does that actually fit in school? Schools won't, most likely will not have standardised assessments, but the student has to have an understanding of what those assessments are in relation to identifying needs, and then what can they do. There's lots of observation checklists out there that they can be thinking about. How do we measure what we're doing in school? Because obviously, as a profession, we want to be showing that occupational therapy is beneficial and the students really can make a difference whilst they're in school. Feedback that I've had from class teachers whilst being practice educator is that because teaching assistants might be given just a handwriting programme to go and undertake with a child 2 or 3 times a week, if anything else happens that the teaching assistant is required for, inevitably they will get pulled from that programme. And if it's not undertaken effectively, then there's literally no point in doing the programme. So the actual fact of having the students there for that targeted period of time and that targeted intervention has really had a lot of benefit to the class and to the school. Thanks, Anne, if you can move on from me. So thinking about intervention planning, and we have talked about the universal approach, which is within the classroom, but for some children that actually is quite difficult to achieve. So you're thinking, okay, if I have to take this child or this small group of children, when will I do it? Class teachers they will love you to take children, but you won't be able to do it in phonics. As an OT, I never take children out of PE because they need that gross motor input. Where can you undertake intervention if you've got a quiet corner of the class because you don't want to disrupt the rest of the children? I've worked in a lot of cupboards in my time in school, so yeah, it's thinking about all of this thing. Think about how often, if you're doing any intervention at school, it wants to be done at least 3 times a week. And then resources, school budgets are not great, so it might be that thought process and being a little bit creative and making some cheap items that you can use with the children. And then it's recording that baseline and the outcome measure at the end. Thank you, Anne, if you can move on for me. We have heard a little bit previously about the different school policies and procedures, and if you can move on for me, please. The student will have to know a bit around the knowledge of special education needs and disabilities, the 4 areas of this, how it relates to the level of support in the school. Does the child have an education healthcare plan? Are they on SEN support? Is there any particular intervention that is there for them? The school policies, such as keeping children safe in education. The student will have to know all about the safeguarding, as Caroline mentioned. They'll need to know who to report any concern to, or if a child discloses anything. They will have to have awareness of the school behaviour policy, because obviously the student will have to participate in that process. Thank you, Anne, if you move on for me. So the MDT in the school, I mean, some schools, depending on the size of them, might not have a Thrive or an ELSA practitioner, but if they do, it's good for the student to understand what that involves and how it benefits the child. They might actually come across some outside agencies coming into schools, so educational psychologists, other NHSOTs perhaps, specialist teaching teams. So again, it's good for the student, if they can, to link in with that if they're working with any children who are involved in those visits, because it just gives that heightened background awareness and knowledge of understanding of that child. Thank you, Anne. And the students do become an integral part of the team. Every student that I have has absolutely loved their placement. Okay, I will say that I was there, so it wasn't fully role emerging. I did work part-time in this school, so I wasn't there all the time, but I was there initially to give them that real initial grounding. So that is one of the things, as I said earlier, the preparation is absolutely key. Going back to Caroline's confident student and anxious student, I could really see how that can happen. So it is really important that the preparation is absolutely key, because we want the students to enjoy their placements. And as I said, all of the students I have absolutely loved it, and the children have really loved them. And as soon as they walk into the class, "Oh, you're taking me," and then everyone else says, "Oh, you're taking me, you're taking me," they absolutely love it. So yeah, it really is a positive thing to do. Thanks, Anne. Can you move on for me? So I see school-based placements inspiring future paediatric OTs. The next slide is actually feedback from one of my final year students who I had with me, and she absolutely loved it. I will say I was very fortunate to have a very committed student. Her independent learning was fabulous. But she loved working within the school. And if you move on 2 slides actually for me, please, Anne, her feedback said that it really reaffirmed that she wanted to be a paediatric OT. And just last week, she has secured herself in a specialist school setting with no graduate actual experience. Her experience that she's taken from placement, and she's now got a role in a specialist setting. So to be part of that for me is and for the school as well, because I've let the school know they were so pleased for her, and it was just so lovely to hear. So that really is just a little bit of what the student is actually learning about and how they are supporting the children when they're actually on placement in school. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ellie. That was brilliant. And thank you to all of our speakers today for sharing your experience